Magnus Carlsen is undoubtedly one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest. And it's probably should come to no surprise to you that he was also insanely good when he was younger. So in this game, he took on the Garry Kasparov when he was only 13 years old in the Reykjavik Rapid of 2004. So Carlsen with the white pieces starts out with d4, d5, and we have a Slav defense from Kasparov. We have some normal developing moves, and Magnus plays bishop g5, pinning this knight to the queen. And after knight d7, you'll notice that Kasparov's white bishop is doing very bad. So Kasparov's only hope for getting this bishop out is probably along this diagonal and getting more activity with these pawns like this. So Magnus here plays e3, and we have a very confrontational approach with queen a5. Queen a5 does many things. First, it pins this knight, so we're going to put stockpile pressure on this knight if it's pinned, if it remains pinned, and it gets out of this knight's own pin. So you'll see that it got out of the pin, and you'll see that there's some stuff being threatened. You know, it's not being threatened right yet, but there are some stuff that it's very attacking type of approach by Kasparov, and Magnus plays the best move with knight d2. Knight d2 is a very nice move because if you'll notice, Kasparov was actually threatening knight e4 too in this position. I forgot to mention. He's threatening knight e4, and that would attack this pin knight, and things would be a little troublesome for Magnus. So he just plays knight d2, and this prevents knight e4, gets out of this pretty annoying pin, and then Kasparov plays bishop b4. Now, there are some moves here, like dc4, which would unleash an attack on this light squared bishop, but Kasparov chooses bishop b4, attacking this knight once more. Magnus reinforces knight with queen c2 and castles by Kasparov. We have bishop e2, just some normal develop moves, and then e5, a central strike by Kasparov. And in many other games, I've seen c5, but Kasparov decides to go more attacking with this, attacking the center with a central pawn rather than a flank pawn. And we have castles by Magnus. He doesn't even care what's happening over here. We don't have to deal with that. He just says, and we'll just go castle, get my king out of the hubbub, and then we can start attacking. We take on d4, and now taking isn't a great move. If you take, you'll notice we can take here, and now there's an attack on this white bishop, and things can get a little dicey here for Magnus, and the computer itself evaluates this as slightly better for black. So Magnus doesn't do this, instead plays the nice move, knight b3. This attacks this queen and this pawn, but more importantly, it gets this queen off this 5th rank, and so the queen has to basically go to b6, and then you'll take on d4. We'll notice Magnus has 2 pawns in the center, which are really nice for him. So I think it's safe to say after this move and this move, this light squared bishop for Magnus is doing very well here, and Magnus is the only one who has a central pawn. So I think it's safe to say that Magnus enjoys a comfortable advantage. After a5, a4 is being threatened, so Magnus just counters that with a4. So, and then queen c7. Kasparov is probably looking for some play along this diagonal. And after rook ae1, h6 kicking out the bishop, and bishop d6. And of course we can see this battery lining down in h2, and Magnus just plays h3. I mean, it's pretty simple. If the pawn is being attacked, you just move it. Chess doesn't have to be so hard sometimes. Knight b6, and now Kasparov attacks the bishop. Now Magnus plays bishop f6. If you take the bishop, it gets really bad here because of the knockout blow, queen g6. You cannot take this queen because of this pin, and after king h8, you simply just start cleaning up pawns. You just take the pawns, and now you're ready to get this rook in, and things are over really fast for Kasparov. I'm pretty sure Magnus could win this, but we have bishop f6, and Kasparov, of course, takes on c4. And I think Kasparov might have missed this because there's actually footage of him playing against this, and he's like shaking his head after this, and he widens his eyes, and he's looking a bit crazed. Magnus plays the nice knight e4. If you take, it's over really fast. It's mate in 4, knight f6, and then queen h7. We get this king further into the middle, and then it's mate with g4, pawn checkmate. So knight e4, and you can see that this knight is being attacked, and kind of this bishop. But so Kasparov just gives a check with the bishop, Magnus moves, and knight d6. Knight d6 just to get your knight out of this attack. And this basically gives away this bishop, but it's not really giving away, because after king h2, knight takes e4, comes with check. And now it's important for Magnus, of course Magnus is not going to blunder this, but it's important for any of you in this position not to just move the king back, because then you would lose your bishop like this. Instead, you have to move bishop e5. You get this bishop out of this attack, and you attack the queen simultaneously. And Kasparov's only move here is knight d6. If you don't, if you just move the queen, then of course you lose your knight. Either way, depends. So knight d6 by Kasparov, and you'll notice that a lot of things are going well for Magnus. A pawn in the center, a bit of some attack on the king, but more importantly, this knight is pinned. It's a naggy little pin here. This this a5 pawn is target in the position for Magnus at least. And so we have queen c5 by Magnus, just attacking this pin knight, and rook d8, the only move that defends the knight. And then we have d5, and you'll notice that Magnus is playing aggressive here against the Kasparov himself, which is very nice, because some players would like to be timid and shy and just play like for a draw, but Magnus here is trying to win against Kasparov. He knows he can do it, and he decides to do it. Queen d7, Magnus clearly realizes he's in an advantageous position, so he's actually playing the best moves. Knight d4, getting your knight into the middle, getting itself into the position more. And knight f5. Kasparov just sacrifices the pawn on c6. After a trade on c6 and knight c6, Magnus is up a pawn. Kasparov did this for my activity with the bishop, and we'll see in the later moves, rook e8, rook d1. You'll see that Kasparov actually starts to get more play with rook a6 and all that stuff. You know, rook a6, the bishop gets in, this battery, this knight is very close to the king. So I think it's safe to say that Kasparov sacrificed this c-pawn to get more of an attack brewing. Knight d4, attacking the queen. We have a trade of knights. And you'll notice very quickly that Kasparov is threatening some nasty stuff on g2. And so Magnus has to trade his queens. And after a trade of rooks, we have a opposite colored bishop endgame. And so despite Magnus being up a pawn, an opposite colored bishop endgame usually means a draw. No matter whether or not the person or one of the players is up a pawn or 2 pawns or 3 pawns, it can usually be a draw given the circumstances. And in this position, it definitely is a draw. And the players agree to a draw on move 52 after bishop f2. And Magnus Carlsen, despite being only 13 years old, managed to draw against Garry Kasparov.